Well, the TSA has become an acronym that many Americans have come to dread. We've heard politicians and frustrated citizens complain about the Transportation Security Administration, from too close for comfort pat-downs to virtually nude snapshots. The agency has come under fire for possibly overstepping its boundaries.
This woman was just doing her job, but she actually touched my vagina.
The other hand on your inner thigh, slowly go up and slide down.
We can do that out here, but if you touch my junk, I'm going to have you arrested.
Well, so, it's not just pat-downs that is frustrating people. We should also mention the agency is costly, $60 billion exactly since 9/11. But despite the negative press, it turns out most Americans actually approve of the agency and the job it's doing. According to a recent Gallup poll, the TSA has an 54% approval rating. That's higher than President Obama's 53% rating, Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney's 40% approval rating, and Congress's dismal 16% approval rating. So why does the TSA continue to have higher poll numbers than presidential nominees and nearly 4 times the approval rating of Congress? Amy Stepanovich, Associate Litigation Counsel for Epic, joined me a short while ago to give me her take.
I think what we're getting out of this poll are 2 things. The first one is people approve more of the TSA. I think this is a positive thing. It means TSA is being trained better. People aren't having as many run-ins. There aren't as many of these egregious actions taking place that we had seen previously. If that number's down, that's good for airline travelers. However, I think the other thing that we're seeing is that a majority of people are finding the TSA effective. And since the documents prove that they are in fact not effective, that the technology they are using is not effective, that just means the TSA is throwing more money at PR and it's working. And I think that's a problem.
And, what people are going to say, there's actually a couple statistics I want to bring up. The TSA and its many rules and equipment are referred to here as the security theater. Despite this, only 13% think the TSA screening procedures are either not too effective or not effective at all. So that leaves 85% of Americans that think that these screenings are extremely, very, or somewhat effective. Mm-hmm. And you know what these people are going to say is that we haven't had a terrorist attack come through, at least in our airports. So they're being like, hey, it seems like it's working.
That's what they're saying. The problem is we also really haven't had an attempt. We haven't had somebody get up to the gate at an airport and try to go through TSA, try to go through airport security with a bomb or with something that could cause a terrorist attack. This is all being handled in advance. What we've always said is that the #1 way to prevent a terrorist attack is intelligence and smart intelligence. And it seems like that's what we're doing finally, and that's what's going to happen. However, terrorist attacks are rare. And the TSA isn't stopping them. They're not preventing anything from getting through security.
So you think people are projecting what seems to be a successful thwarting of terrorism and crediting the TSA for doing that when, in fact, it was other intelligence that led to the prevention of these things?
Exactly. The TSA, the machines that they use, the magnetometers, the body scanners, the pat-downs, none of these can detect powdered explosives. This is the #1 tool that terrorists use to make bombs. This is what the Christmas Day bomber used. They would not prevent a terrorist action from occurring. The only way to prevent that is to stop them from getting to the gate in the first place.
We should mention, however, there was that underwear bomber and the shoe bomber. What about those, sir? What about those scenarios?
Well, that's the powdered explosives I was just talking about. The underwear bombers, the Christmas Day bomber, he was able to get through airport security because of...
So in that way, TSA wasn't effective, right? Because he was able to make it through
exactly.
TSA.
He got on a plane in Amsterdam, was coming to the United States, had the powdered explosives in his underwear, and almost, and if not for the incredible difficulty of creating one of these bombs to begin with, he could have caused a major incident to occur. He ultimately, thankfully, was not successful. However, none of the TSA actions would have prevented the exact same thing from happening.
Do you think these pat-downs and these body scanners that Epic, your organization, opposes, in any way actually serve to protect Americans from terrorism?
No, they are actually security theater. They make people feel a lot safer. They make people think when they get on a plane, okay, everybody's gone through security, nobody's going to have a gun or a knife or a bomb. But they actually don't prevent a lot of those things from getting through. There's numerous cases of people getting on board air flights with things that should be prohibited. And they're really just not making anyone safer. We recently actually got, the survey that we're talking about had 1,000 respondents. We recently had over 22,000 people sign up to ask the TSA to explain why it was implementing this billion-dollar security system that didn't work. I think that's telling.
Well, we would hope that they're at least doing something, because it's costing taxpayers, well, it cost taxpayers $60 billion since 9/11, employs 62,000 people across the country. So I think the hope is there that they're doing something that's effective.
The hope is there. They're not explaining it, of course. Epic has a over 1 year long court order telling TSA that they have to accept public comment, provide certain rules and regulations for when they can use the scanning equipment. They're not complying with that court order. We now have had to go back to the court and ask them to force the TSA to comply with this court order, because they're not doing it on their own. So without the TSA providing an explanation, we can't really even know why they think this money is effective. As we've said, it's not, or why it's needed. As we've said, it's not effective. So,
but despite this, the TSA, I mean, as we just pointed out, they have a higher approval rating, President Obama, than, Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney, a much higher approval rating than Congress. So, I mean, based on what you just said, they're not actually that effective. So what do you think is going on here? If we look at these numbers, are the American people missing something?
Well, I think, again, like I said to begin with, the number one thing that is driving these numbers up is better training. TSA is actually something that travelers deal with on a day-to-day basis. Most of the American public do not have one-on-one interactions with President Obama or members of Congress. They do, however, get to go to the airport and have a face-to-face with members of the TSA. And as long as they're trained, as long as they're not groping people or needlessly harassing them, we have stacks and stacks of complaints from people since the TSA first instigated these screening technologies, these screening procedures, of people complaining. As long as those numbers are down, we can understand that TSA's approval
totally
ratings
makes sense.
are up.
Who wants to go to the airport and be groped? Usually not a pleasant experience. Never happened, but I would assume. Anyways, Amy, I know that you have a court case. Epic has a court case against DHS in the works. Can you tell us what is the latest on that?
Well, we have filed a petition with the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals asking for them to force the TSA to act now, to force them to comply with last year's court order, to institute notice and comment rulemaking, to implement a rule that would guide security procedures. They haven't done that. The court has now told TSA, told DHS they have to respond to our petition for a mandamus, which is what would force them to act. So we're moving forward strongly on that. Like I said, we just had a petition at the White House that garnered over 22,000 signatures that asked the White House, that asked TSA to explain why they haven't acted yet. So people are getting behind this.
All right, Amy, really appreciate you coming on the show. That was Amy Stepanovich, Associate Litigation Counsel for Epic.